Ryan Seacrest here. When you have a busy schedule, it's important to maximize your downtime. One of the best ways to do that is by going to ChumbaCasino.com. Chumba Casino has all your favorite social casino games like spin slots, bingo, and solitaire that you can play for free for a chance to redeem some serious prizes. So hop on to ChumbaCasino.com now and live the Chumba life. Sponsored by Chumba Casino.
No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. 21 plus. Terms and conditions apply.
Do you want more success, more growth, more results? Then it's time for the Boundless Success Accelerator from the Modern Observer Group. This isn't your average coaching program. It's where top performers come to dominate. Weekly group sessions, on-demand coaching, a community that's got your back, and a power-packed library of tools to supercharge your business and career. No more excuses, no more waiting. Get in, level up, and start building the life you've been dreaming about. Visit us at modernobserver.com/boundlesssuccess to join today. Let's get you to the next level.
We are lighting the candle, a world that works. I am Bill Correll, and I'm here with my partner in saving the world, Jan Jeremias. And every week we get together and we talk. We have a conversation that we just kind of just make stuff up for a little while. But the whole idea is to get into the domain of empowerment. So that both us, or we as the presenters of this podcast, and you as the listeners, can walk away with this maybe with a little bit something that you didn't have before you started listening. So I have a couple of announcements to make. This is a very, very special day for us because this is kind of like the episode before the big deal episode. Mm-hmm. We are today at 199 episodes for this podcast, which some would say is not too shabby.
That's right.
When we first got started 4 years ago, I want to say it was not really it wasn't a given that we'd get to 20 episodes. But I think with the support and guidance of our illustrious and fearless leader producer, Eric Lopkin, we just kept, growing and expanding and adapting. And of course, we have different people on the show these days than we did in the very beginning, except for me. I think one thing that's the continuity for the entire podcast from start to now is I've been on every single episode. And Jan has been my primary conversational buddy / sounding board / verbal volleyballer for about the last 2 years, it seems. Maybe a little bit longer now, but I don't know. I just get used to hanging out with you every single week. I'm sort of spoiled. You know that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's been a interesting, as well. It's always right, an interesting journey.
Yes. Yeah. Other people have to pay big bucks to get time with you, but I just get to hang out with you for about an hour a week at no charge, which I really do.
At no charge, yeah. Well, it costs you in other ways.
You know what? Those other ways are actually they're what my life is about. You know that? I love my friends, and I love you too, buddy. Ed.
Right. Yeah, you too.
So on top of being episode 199, and if your math is good, our next episode is going to be kind of a landmark episode for us. But on top of that, my business turned 35 this week. On March 14th, Progressive Data Systems has now been in business since 1990. If my math is any good, that's 35 whole years that we've been doing business under that banner. And in addition to that, on Friday, I have a birthday as well. Personally, I will be 71 years old, if you can imagine that. we didn't have a lot of old people in my family when I was growing up. Most of the men, especially, were gone by the time they were 50 or 60 years old. But we're doing better in that department these days, which I am pleased to be here to report. So, in addition to all of that, we have amazing things happening in the world, and spring is really starting to well, spring has sprung. I guess that's the only way. Spring is starting to spring, but it has sprung, hasn't it?
Yes, yes, it is.
The evidence of that are these little pretty flowers that come poking out of the ground, like the snowdrops and the crocuses, and all of that. They're just wonderful. Hibiscus, they're all coming.
Looking for excitement? Chumba Casino is here. Play anytime, play anywhere. Play on the train, play at the store, play at home, play when you're bored. Play today for your chance to win and get daily bonuses when you log in. So what are you waiting for? Don't delay. Chumba Casino is free to play.
Experience social gameplay like never before. Go to Chumba Casino right now to play hundreds of games, including online slots, bingo, Slingo, and more. Live the Chumba life at ChumbaCasino.com.
No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. 21 plus. Terms and conditions apply.
I haven't seen that many flowers as of yet. I see lots of buds on the trees starting to, come out, which is really exciting to me. But not many flowers yet. But that's okay. It's just I like seeing the grass get a little bit greener each day, and so that's actually quite fun. I'm like, oh, it's a bit greener today than it was yesterday. And, so yeah, so it is really a lot of fun to go out and actually see it all. And then like you have one warm day, like yesterday was quite warm here.
Yes.
And, and all of a sudden it's like, it's like you could watch them grow. It's like all of a sudden you're like, oh my gosh, those buds weren't there yesterday. And you just
Right.
need a good one warm day, and all of a sudden it's woo, and it just opens up.
Well, I mean, I think the really cool thing, just to kind of emphasize what you're talking about, our harbingers of spring are all the bulbs when they start popping up. We don't have any tulips yet or anything like that. But in the back, when we start to see the magnolias, and they're, the flower pods on those things are starting to get real furry, and they're just waiting to bust open. And I think with 3 days in the 60s this week, wouldn't surprise me at all if we see a lot of new leafage coming out as well.
Yeah, I have one tree in the front that I think didn't make it. It was like I wondered about it last year, and I get the feeling I'm looking at it going, I don't really know. So I might have to. It's a baby tree pretty young tree that just, I guess sometimes they make it and sometimes they don't.
Right. But yeah, you want to give it a couple of seasons though. I've seen ones that look like they're really dead, after a year, come firing back year two. So
Yeah, no, I know. So I'm just like, I'm debating, but yeah. So, but I've noticed, even in my bushes up front that, it's different. I'm like, oh my gosh, greener today. And I go out, and now that they're not snow covered, I say hello to them like multiple times a day when I walk by. I'm
yeah.
like, how you doing?
Yeah. Yeah. There's just so many places I can look around the yard and see. For instance, we've got this hemlock hedge that we put in, I don't know, maybe a dozen, 15 years ago, after we lost our maple trees that were over 100 years old. And every year with the new growth is a completely different color than the whole rest of the hemlock hedge. It's like this yellow green on the top. It looks fresh, and it's really lovely. It looks like it should be there, almost like it's got a little crew cut or something, So all of that sort of sets the table for us today. And I think with that in mind, last week we spent a little bit of time chatting about friendship.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm wondering today if we could talk about maybe something else that I think we have questions about, in our world at this moment. It kind of strikes me that there's something going on around the whole idea of honesty, and telling the truth, and actually being grounded. You're not going to be as probably aware or or seeing that as much as I do, unless you're seeing that with some of the people that you network with on LinkedIn. I am constantly getting offers for friendship or connecting on LinkedIn from people that I know have absolutely no interest in doing business with my business. And there's no way that I could ever network help them. But I'm very wary, because if I don't know somebody and they're sending me a request to be a friend or to make a connection, 9 out of 10 times I get another thing the next day, which is usually a scam.
Yeah,
So,
I'm a lot more careful about that on Facebook than I am on LinkedIn.
right.
But on Facebook, if I don't know somebody, even if they're friends of somebody I know, like I have to like really, really take a moment where I might, you know, even ask somebody if I know them or if I've met them at a meeting or something, or if they're friends of a friend of mine, like kind of thing before I friend them on Facebook.
Yes.
And even I do peruse the LinkedIn things with that too, because every now and then I get like what almost seems like a automatic, like kind of message from someone that's not like they haven't written, that it's more like AI generated, or it's some sort of CRM message that happens when and I'm kind of like, I don't really know. And I've literally said to people, like, I'm very good at this on LinkedIn because it drives me nuts when people um, solicit to me and I don't know them. Like, I know a lot of people, I must get like 3 requests a day from people of like, oh, I could help you with your website, or I could help you with your marketing, or,
Yeah.
like yada, yada, yada. And I'm like, if I don't know you, like, and you haven't taken the time to get to know me, then I'm not doing business with you.
That's completely the keys to the kingdom right there. People like you and me, especially, who have a little time in grade, and we've got a fairly strong, vibrant network. The three legged stool of know, like, and trust, very important to us. And so there's no way to short circuit that. And the people who come in and give you all the reasons why you ought to take their crypto advice, or you ought to be, investing in such and so think startup, or all the rest of those sort of things. I don't know, that they're the last people in the world that I would ever take any advice from.
Yeah. And I'll sit there and I'll say to somebody, if you want to take the time to get to know me, I'm happy to do that. And then we can just see what happens.
Right.
And most of the time, I don't hear from them again because that's not what they're interested in. They're not interested in really getting to know me and what my business is about and who I am, on multiple levels, besides for my business and in my business, and and I'm just like, it's okay. I mean, so if you're not going to take that time, then I'm not going to give you my money, basically.
Yeah, exactly. And I do kind of the same thing. Only my language is a little bit more straightforward. I just let them know I only do business with friends.
Yeah, I mean, I've said that to people. I
Yeah.
only do business with people that I know,
Yeah.
and that have taken the time to get to know me, is usually what I tell people.
Right. So
I mean,
in terms of,
just to finish my last thought about that, partly because, like you said, we have a strong network. So, for example, I know, like, personally know about probably a dozen people who do websites, probably more.
yes.
And so if somebody comes to me trying to pitch me a new website, that they're going to make me a new website, I'm like, I know 12 people that do that. And I'm probably going to go to them first
Right.
before I go to you. Unless you like get to know me and whatever. But if you're just pitch slapping me, not going to happen with
That's
that word.
one of my favorite terms. Pitch slapping. Yeah. That sounds like something that Wendy would say, Wendy Corner.
Okay.
Anyhow. Well, if you think about it, it's easier in the moment to tell an untruth or a near truth, right? For anybody that's not interested in being around for a long time.
Mhm.
And so from their standpoint, as a way of doing business or as just a way of being, they don't see any harm in it because it's a sorting process for them. That you're either going to do this on our first interaction or you're not. I'll try one more time and you're going to either do this or you're not. And then by the third time, they've taken your time up. Now, as you said, 3 or 4 times a day, every day of the week for a month, that's a lot of time that's potentially wasted going nowhere with people. So that's why I start off on the first thing. I don't leave it up to them.
Mm-hmm.
I just basically say, I'm looking for a new best friend. What do you got?
Mm-hmm.
End of game. I'm not interested in anything else you got. And usually it's, okay, there's not going to be an online romance for me because I'm coming up on 50 years of marriage. Not that means anything, to a lot of people, but it means a lot to me, and you're not going to really do a lot from the standpoint of pitching me on business or pitching me on any kind of monkey business, just simply because I don't know. I kind of made some decisions when I was early on, when I first started working for other people. I tried doing things the corner cutting way a few times in my life. And you know what, Jan? Every single time it blew up in my face.
How to have fun anytime, anywhere. Step 1, go to ChumbaCasino.com.
ChumbaCasino.com. Got it.
Step 2, collect your welcome bonus.
Come to Papa welcome bonus.
Step 3, play hundreds of casino-style games for free.
That's a lot of games. All for free?
Step 4, unleash your excitement.
Woohoo!
Chumba Casino has been delivering thrills for over a decade. So claim your free welcome bonus now and live the Chumba life. Visit ChumbaCasino.com.
No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. 21 plus. Terms and conditions apply.
So I just decided early on, it's better for me to just play things straight.
Mm-hmm.
And if something goes wrong or I get myself into a dicey situation, I'm going to depend on honesty, and I'm going to depend on, being, a true spirit, and just always going the same direction and being consistent. And either that's going to work for me or it isn't. And I can report after all of this time that mostly works.
Mm-hmm.
And when it doesn't work, it only is not working for the short term. Over the long term, I think it's the best way to go.
Well, as you're talking, I'm thinking, and I actually just glanced and looked it up because I was curious and I had never thought about it, that the word honesty or honest shares the same word origin as honor.
Yes.
And so this idea of, when you're honest, you're honoring yourself and you're also honoring the other person. And, not in a, there's always those, you get those circumstances where, if someone cooks a really elaborate meal and you don't like it kind of thing, or when they ask you how it was, do you sit there and you just kind of you kind of phrase it, or you kind of frame it as oh yes, it was really good or whatever, because you don't want to hurt their feelings, because they've slaved over it kind of thing.
Yeah.
So you have those circumstances, and we're not talking about those, to me, what I almost call kindnesses, because they're, that person has really put in all their effort, whatever you want to say. And I guarantee you, if you say good try, it's not going to be the same, but in general, I think it's about, so much of it to me is, I think you get the same thing if you're truly honest with yourself about something. When
That's
you
where
look
it all starts. That's what honor is.
Are you have something going on, or, honesty also, if you're truly honest with yourself, you might have to take responsibility for something, and sit there and say, but it's really that idea is, to me, if you're honest with yourself, then you honor yourself, and then you're acknowledging your own needs, which is, to me, much more very linked to honor.
Yeah, there's a lot to take out of that particular sentence. And, there are so many people who say that, this is honorable or more honorable or less honorable. And I do think it's kind of one of those things that's either on or it's off. Like being pregnant, you either is or you isn't. You're either honorable or you're not. That you decided not to be honorable, once or twice and see how that went. Stop and think about it. Most people who are in jail only committed a crime that took less than 5 or 10 seconds, but there they are. So you got to be responsible at all times for what you do next. And if you do that, you can keep yourself in a situation where if you're using honor as your compass of the best direction to go, you have a few questions to ask before you take action. And I guess where we're at right now, and the thing that I'm seeing is there's less of that I come across, and there's a lot more of it. People doing the expedient thing, the easy thing, the exaggeration, et cetera, et cetera. And I don't have a real problem with people exaggerating every once in a while if it's mostly true. However, if they're exaggerating all the time, or they're actually stating things that are completely false only to get people to believe them and go along, I don't know. I don't know how you work with that. I don't even have a clue how you could ever be in a situation where you could trust somebody that behaves that way.
Well, and I think also you get people who, like you said, you have to think about it and you have to ponder it and maybe pause for a moment or a few moments to ask questions or to ask those questions of yourself. And I don't know that people do that.
Yeah.
People are very quick to be led. Let's just say that. And I think that, that's part of the reason I think that I don't spend a whole lot. Besides for business posting, I'm on LinkedIn a lot, but I'm not on Facebook a lot.
Right.
And I think that's part of the reason because, basically you're fed a particular, like your feed is directed a particular way depending on what you tend to respond to. And so my attitude is I don't know how much of this is really, I'm only hearing now. I know years ago, I don't know that I knew this, but I think we all know now that basically, we're only getting one side of any particular, we're only hearing one side. We're only being fed one set of information.
Right.
And so I think that, those questions or that pause, then maybe you're not so quick to, let's say, follow, and you're more apt to sit and ponder a little bit more and actually ask some of those questions like, does this seem true to me? And does it feel right? And what are the facts about this? And is it really, like all the things that, getting curious about it and things like that, because I think that what ends up happening is then, I don't know, and I don't really know that people even know that they're being that it's a dishonesty. I just think people have gotten so used to like not really thinking.
Yeah, the expedient thought is replacing the studied and decided upon thought. In many cases, it's a gut reaction, and in many cases they'll state as fact, or even I will. I'll take responsibility for when something comes out of my mouth that is more of a seeming than it is the truth, or is factually based, especially in other people's behavior, because it's kind of difficult to sit down and run through a dozen different things to explain to somebody why you think someone's general behavior is dishonest, or someone's general behavior is really great. The fact that I like them or don't like them really doesn't make any difference in the world at the end of the game. What makes the difference in the world is whether or not we're starting to have a network and a web of credibility, of shared responsibility for what is so, not necessarily what do we think. And when we can at least tell the truth and distinguish between what we think versus what is so, that's where I think we start making some gains in terms of reclaiming honor and honesty.
Mm-hmm. No, I like that. Is what do you think? And I think that people have gotten to very used to kind of traveling the road of less resistance.
Yes.
And if you go along with people or opinions, or you know, where there's not, at least maybe it's in your circle where there's not much resistance, then there's sort of like, well, do I really want to make waves here, or do I really want to contradict or say something different? Because I don't want to be around that resistance. I don't want to be around that, confrontation or that, so people I think navigate, and people have to learn how to, and I'm not saying, I'm working on this all the time, because there are situations where I'm literally like, okay, if we're going to talk about this, I'll go clean the kitchen kind of thing, because I can't, hard for me to sit there and listen to some of the, to some of what they share.
Sure.
I don't know. That's what it was. I might be better at it now, in certain circumstances. But I remember like just sitting there and certain conversations would come up and I'll be like, it's okay, I'll go play with the kids, because I didn't want to get all riled up. But I think that people are very quick to kind of not, I think it's like the forgetting to think for yourself is part of it.
Yes.
It's, my opinions are based on, let's say, certain things I know and certain things that, like, some of what I've learned in education and some of what I just look at the mosaic of what contributes to that, what my views on something.
Yes.
And some of it is based on values. Some of it is based on fact of like, okay, this is what I learned through my years of education, and my work that I did. And some of it is things I've thought of that just seem like this makes sense to me.
Yes.
And it's a conglomerate. Like it's like a combination of all those things for me. And one is after all that, do I feel okay with what let's say my view or what I.
Hello, it is Ryan, and I was on a flight the other day playing one of my favorite social spin slot games on ChumbaCasino.com. I looked over at the person sitting next to me, and you know what they were doing? They were also playing Chumba Casino. Coincidence? I think not. Everybody's loving having fun with it. Chumba Casino is home to hundreds of casino-style games that you can play for free anytime, anywhere, even at 30,000 feet. So sign up now at ChumbaCasino.com to claim your free welcome bonus. That's ChumbaCasino.com and live the Chumba life.
No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. See terms and conditions. 18+.
Believe is true for me anyway. And I'm not saying it's true for anybody else. That's what's true for me. And am I willing to sort of like, am I willing to take the consequences or responsibility for that?
Yes. Well, I'll tell you what, you're actually reminding me, and I think I owe you an apology for it. Last week and the week before, I used some pejorative, short code, fundamentally guttural language, which, was in our conversations, honoring who you are, is not something that would ever have been intended for you to listen to or hear. However, I do want to, take responsibility for the impact that I was choosing to put in the moment. And maybe it hit and maybe it didn't hit. Our listeners will let us know, but I just want to let you know it was never my intention to dishonor your listening or your partnership. So being sloppy sounding while using those words, which I know are very emotionally charged for people who aren't used to saying them or hearing them. For other people, it's just the coin of the realm. It's how people talk, but not educated people who are interested in continuing being an educated listener and speaker, right?
Well, I know some very educated people who use really, powerful or whatever words. And I always say there are certain circumstances, which I do, but those are few and far between.
Yes.
And when I do, it's always funny because like I'll have friends who say to me, you can never speak like that unless it's around two topics. It's really funny. It's kind of funny because I'll say, yeah, because there just seems to be no other words that kind of sum up the way I feel in that moment or when I'm talking about that topic.
We're on the same page. And to hear it over and over and over in a conversation, it's like if I listen to two people talking to each other and I hear the word actually 4 or 5 times between those two people, like one more time, I want to like gouge my eyes out. It's lazy. Pick up another word. But every once in a while, a guttural word takes the listener and the speaker exactly where you want to go to say, you're feeling helpless right now after having experienced that in a situation where we never use those words. This isn't that kind of podcast. And I've actually had people, guests who come on, both this podcast and the, simple questions for 100 people, who ask me whether or not it's okay to let loose with F-bombs. And I always say, you know what, here's how I would characterize that. In the heat of the moment, expressing an emotion or something like that, let's see how it goes. And they never do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I mean, I think it's, when people are used to using that language, it's very hard for them to find other words. And I have I have a few friends that I do work with.
Yes.
Who, they use it and I kind of ignore it, or, I kind of let it go by. But if I'm setting up meetings with other people with them, I will give them fair warning beforehand. Like, I'm telling you now, like, we're meeting with this person. Please, sort of check what you say or how you say it in this company, because they will turn off. And I was talking about that with my client this morning, because she was telling me about a family circumstance with a family member that's not talking to her at the moment.
Right.
And I said, she's like, I really don't think I said anything like that bad or whatever. And I said, sometimes it's just the way you phrase something. Like, we all have words that I would call trigger words or trigger phrases, which kind of like, just like someone says it and you're like, you just automatically go into almost this fight or flight mode. It's like, something inside of you just wants, like, your stomach starts to churn and you're just like, ugh, whatever it is. And I said, maybe it's just that you used a phrase, which sometimes we don't even know.
Right.
Like, I used a phrase to somebody one day. I mean, it was a really nice phrase. It was something about her being beautiful, or she looking beautiful, or something like that.
Hello, it is Ryan, and I was on a flight the other day playing one of my favorite social spin slot games on ChumbaCasino.com. I looked over at the person sitting next to me, and you know what they were doing? They were also playing Chumba Casino. Coincidence? I think not. Everybody's loving having fun with it. Chumba Casino is home to hundreds of casino-style games that you can play for free anytime, anywhere, even at 30,000 feet. So sign up now at ChumbaCasino.com to claim your free welcome bonus. That's ChumbaCasino.com and live the Chumba life.
No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. See terms and conditions. 18+.
And she said, I have to tell you that I hate when people say that to me. Whatever. It was actually a very nice thing. And she told me the reason why. And it was so interesting. Like, it was just, I didn't get up. I said, I'm really sorry if I used it and upset you. But she was like, no. Like, how could you know that phrasing bothered me? And I have a really close friend who I do a lot of work with, who, like, when you do something, she'll be like, it's fine. And to me, personally, I hate it. Fine means, like, I don't know, like fine. How are you? Fine. When you're really not fine, so I think that's how I look at it. But I realize it now that she's not using it in that way. It's just the phrasing that she uses. But originally she would say it, and I'd be like, oh, I guess it's like, part of me would be like, I wonder if it's okay. Like, she only said it was like, is it good? Is it whatever? And I tend not to. So it was very interesting. And sometimes we don't know that about another person unless they're willing to share with us that, you use that phrase, and that phrase really doesn't give me the warm and fuzzies, like.
Yeah, I had a very similar conversation last week. And as a matter of fact, it went something along the order of, I did something, I told them that I thought that how they handled the situation was probably better than anybody else I'd ever seen in that particular situation. And her response was, well, how should I have answered it? And I said, no, you did fine. And she said, Well, when you say that, it makes me feel like this, blah, blah, blah. Here's what it means to me. And I said, well, what do you think I meant by it? And she goes, well, here's what it means to me. I said, well, what do you think I meant by it? And she's finally stopped for a moment. And she said, you thought I handled that better than anybody else you've seen for a while. And I said, well, yeah, something like that. And she said, all right. And I said, most of the time when you get upset about what somebody else is saying, it's got nothing to do with them,
Right.
It's all in your side of the conversation. And maybe sometimes you could ask yourself, I wonder what they mean by that. And you could say, what do you mean by that, Bill? You can turn it into a joking situation.
Right, right.
What do you talk about, Willis?
Yeah, but I think that it's, this is this part. I mean, I love our conversations, but this is really important to me because I think that, how things land with us
Yeah.
is really like, and it's so interesting how people can phrase things or do things. And sometimes it's their history of your relationship with them.
Right.
Like I had a circumstance like that where I got like the same thing from two different people. And one person I got really upset with, and the other person, it was fine. And I really think it was because of where that person was coming from and just the way the exact words or the tone they used
Right.
versus the second person. But I think sometimes we have no idea of the phrasing we use and how that's going to land with somebody.
Yeah. Yeah, it goes, from the high level, doing that on purpose in terms of creating negotiations, between countries, down to the totally dysfunctional level, where a husband and wife know how to plug each other in, and the wife knows that if she says the following 3 sentences, whatever they are, she will get her husband to beat her. And they'll call the police, and then the police will show up, and the police will say, you did it again, didn't you? Looking at the wife. And she said, yes, that always gives me the upper hand. He's going to feel guilty now for the next 3 days, and I've got him where I want him. And my cop friend who was a sergeant on the police force here said, I probably, in my 17 years of being on the Willimantic force, they lived in the area for 5 years. I bet you I was at their home 50 times. And then she never pressed charges. But
I think that I think we go through life. One is those words, like those phrases, which we have we interpret so much by the way they land with us and our history of where, of what we've heard through the years, and I think that's part of it. And then also, on the other hand, we live and we assume a lot. Like we assume people understand us. We assume we understand them and where they're coming from.
Yes.
And we really don't. We really don't.
Well, if you've got a good friend, you're going to find out in a heartbeat that you did not understand, right? Because you have to have some givens in the world. And there are some things that are just commonplace for you and me, and maybe not the same things, but for other people. So you do have to have these, like, what do we really mean in this conversation? Let's keep until we have understanding.
Right. And then it's the kind of thing where, like you said, honesty. So being in a conversation with someone, and, I said this to somebody recently, a family member, and they were telling me something, and I said, what you're saying right now is really not helpful. It was like, right now, what you're saying is really not helpful for where I am. And I'm not saying it might be helpful on a different day, but in this moment, that is not helpful.
Right.
And I think that you have to be willing to, and I don't know many relationships where people actually speak to people like that not with cruelty or whatever, or harsh words, just in a very calm way, that's really, right now, that's not being very helpful.
Well, see, that's powerful to say that out loud, but I think you're also pointing to something that most people don't have the confidence in themselves to stay in an uncomfortable conversation until it works. If we just trained kids how to, how a kid will never give it up, once it'll be tit for tat going back and forth till they fall asleep on the floor.
Mm-hmm.
But when somehow by the time you get to 12 to 15 years old, that doesn't work anymore, and you get shut down, you get made fun of, and you lose your social capital, etc. But what if we teach kids that the right way to handle a situation where you're not sure if you're understood or if you agree is to keep working on defining your terms until both folks agree on what it means.
Well, it was really interesting because I was having this conversation with a friend of mine on the weekend, and we were talking about when someone has done something that's slighted or hurted us or hurted us. That was not good English.
It's a word that worked. It was a time for that to be coined.
Right. Hurt us. But what we can say, and so we decided we were going to come up with phrases like little phrases that you can use in different circumstances, like kind of think of what you're speaking about, and just have them available. Like, if we're gonna, and so one of the phrases that she said that she does sometimes is like, she'll say, if somebody has like, I don't know, done something that was really kind of like unconscious, where, they really, and I don't want to, I would use an example which somebody like for me, recently I was in a circumstance where I had someone, I wanted to go to something that was quite like 6 hours round trip, like a long distance. And it was at night and I really didn't want to do the drive alone. And I know somebody really close and to where I live and close in relationship. And they live about 10 minutes from me, and they went and they didn't ask me if I wanted to like come along. Like they didn't pick up the phone and say, "Oh, we're going. Would you like a ride?" Or "Are you going?" I mean, they knew I would be there if I could. And I was really upset. And, my friend Jo and I are on the phone, and she said, what she does is she uses the phrase, if she speaks to them afterwards, like, maybe not now, but she's like, if it comes up, it's like, "I'm sure you were not aware."
Yes.
When you did this, I'm sure you were not aware, or it wasn't your intention to make me feel left out or slighted. And she said, because, but the whatever, but I really would have appreciated if you would have, I didn't get to go because I didn't want to make the drive alone. And I'm sure that wasn't your intention. Or, but something like that. We decided we were going to come up with like a little booklet of phrases that we could like grab onto in certain circumstances that might be helpful. Not in every. And she used to do that. She's in the more traditional medical world. And she used to do that for, especially because she worked a lot with people that were of, a lot of very, it was a very ethnically diverse population with people a lot of them who didn't have, like English wasn't their first language, and they were trying to navigate, like, speaking to doctors and everything. And so they would come up with a list, like she would help them, like how to speak up for themselves and ask questions. And that was like, kind of like, I think that was actually a course she ran, kind of thing, or a support group that she ran. And it was just kind of interesting, kind of like that, but for just human conversations and relationships of like, well, maybe we should come up with a little, a guideline of how to start to open up those discussions.
Well, I think, being a committed communicator, having, troubleshooting tools that are agreed upon, that start to let people know, I've got the toolbox out now. You're probably unaware of this, but you said blah, blah, blah. And when you said blah, 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 how I felt was, yada, yada. And I made it mean blah, 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 blah. And we just kept moving. So I couldn't listen to you any longer than that. Not your fault, but mine. And I want to clean that up with you, in almost every single instance where there's a reaction, a trigger, if you will. I don't know. Sometimes somebody shoots bullets at you, but rarely, you know, they're not physical bullets really. And so what you have to do is just realize that that seemed like a bullet, but it wasn't. Let's find out what the dickens it was.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's like it is, as I navigate, it's really interesting to me how I think those circumstances when you kind of look at them and you think about them, of how we are very how we interpret the world based on our own perception, which we need to, right? We see
No
things through
choice.
yeah, we see things through the glasses that we wear, I mean, and kind of realizing that people look back at the same way. They're looking through the glasses that they wear.
Yeah. I mean, if you trust your gut, your reaction is going to be your best guide as to whether or not there's more work to be done right now. And if you play over it and you act like it wasn't important, I guarantee you that's ground that's going to get covered again at a very uncomfortable, inopportune time when you least want it to. So, why not, if you've got the time now, spend a moment, get some agreement, then move on?
Yeah.
I guess,
Well,
again, this is all coming from making a decision somewhere along the way that you're not interested in labeling people and then interacting with the label, that you're really interested in communicating with folks and understanding. And, Stephen Covey says it so well. Most people are in a conversation waiting their turn to spout whatever it is on their mind and trying to remember what it was that they wanted to spout while the other person is carrying on longer than they expected to.
that's right.
So it's like, what the hell was I thinking?
Right, exactly, exactly.
And what's really important is to understand what the person is saying and respond to that first. And if there was a valuable contribution you have to that in terms of constructing a communication, as opposed to taking terms, doing a monologue, now it's your turn to talk. Now it's my turn to talk. Now it's your turn. And we make no difference in the world. And we didn't build up any friendship with each other.
Mhm, mhm.
There's always a really great byproduct from communicating.
No, I mean, it's really interesting. But we talked about like in the beginning, and I think that, as I've been focused, that's been a focus of mine over the past, let's say, year, is communicating and how do I communicate and being a better listener. I've been like really working on that for myself with like, those ideas of Stephen Covey and others in mind, of like not thinking about what I'm going to say next versus what the person is saying, and really going through like that. And I think that, I've also then been working on how do I communicate with myself and what do I tell myself and what kind of.
Hello, it is Ryan, and I was on a flight the other day playing one of my favorite social spin slot games on ChumbaCasino.com. I looked over at the person sitting next to me, and you know what they were doing? They were also playing Chumba Casino. Coincidence? I think not. Everybody's loving having fun with it. Chumba Casino is home to hundreds of casino-style games that you can play for free anytime, anywhere, even at 30,000 feet. So sign up now at ChumbaCasino.com to claim your free welcome bonus. That's ChumbaCasino.com and live the Chumba life.
No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. See terms and conditions. 18+.
How do I phrase things and to start to look in patterns of my own, like the words I use on myself versus, the words I use with other people.
Right.
And, because I think that it's all valuable. And if you speak harshly and you criticize yourself all the time, well, the likelihood that you're probably going to have that, at least in the back of your mind, when you communicate with others, is probably pretty high.
Yep. Yeah, that's the one thing that we can be sure of. Everyone has a reason for doing everything that they do. And the time that's spent explaining to other people what your reason for what you said is time that's wasted in terms of building, some kind of consensus about what the real topic is. But, you can't create friendship, you can't create relationship, you can't keep expanding, those three circles of know, like, and trust while you're busy explaining to people how they don't know anything, and they'll never be as smart as you are. You never say it in those words, but you have different ways to just kind of let them know. You know, yeah, I'm going to leave you where there's the passive aggressive way to, to leave a ding on somebody's soul, or you're almost daring them to do something about it. And people never do for some reason. It's like you won't cross over certain areas until it's time to throw down. And
Yeah.
most people consider throwing down a real failure,
Right. Well, I'm doing this program, and a few weeks ago we were talking about extreme language of like, you always do this, or you never do that,
Right.
kind of thing. And those kind of things, because and I was listening to a podcast also that Eric Simon did. It was just making me laugh because it was just sitting there, because he said most likely that person's going to come back with the one circumstance where they didn't do that. Like if you said you never, and they'll come back and say, well, what do you mean? I did it last week, kind of thing, you never pick up your socks. Well, I picked up my socks yesterday, kind of thing. So it was just kind of funny because you realize that if you use those kind of words with someone else,
yeah,
or let alone with yourself, there's always, they are going to come back with like a way to contradict whatever you've said, because, and so it was just made me smile because I was like, that's so true.
Yeah, a case in point is a post that I put up on Facebook, and I was like, can we please not let politics be the reason that we hurt each other, and be mature enough to have a conversation where we're not disempowering, the other person's speech. So I put that up, and I got a whole bunch of people. Yeah. This is what we really want to do. And then another guy puts it up. He says, well, that's what MAGA people do always, when they're losing an argument. And I answered to that. I said, always? That's pretty often,
That's right. Always is a lot,
So the fun part of it is that while he's denigrating another group of people, he's doing exactly what we're talking about,
Yeah. Right. But it's like even those extreme words, and I'll find myself like that. It's like, somebody, if you have a relationship that ends really badly, and all of a sudden no one loves you,
right?
Or I'm sorry, what?
Or so it seems.
Or so it seems. Or, you have one thing that goes bad, and all of a sudden everything in your life is bad. And it's kind of starting to look at that and realize like, okay, well, that's one thing isn't working out for me, but really I have a lot of things that are working out for me, or that one person doesn't love me, but they do have a lot of people in my life who do love me, kind of thing. And when all else fails, I have Tonka, if I can't find a human being, but I'm just, but how quick we are to kind of use those even phrases with ourselves, like, and all of a sudden I'm thinking about it in my own life and thinking to myself, oh my gosh, it's so true. Like how quick we are to use those things or say those things to ourselves.
Yeah. And we come by it honestly, because that's the coin of the realm. Everyone always talks that way, right? Like what I just said. But they will if they do. They will if they do. And sometimes they don't. And what are you going to do? So you can either interact with being right about how things are always going to go, or you can go and do what it takes to make a difference in the world,
Mm-hmm.
Take a chance. Get out of your own way. Stop believing your own boiled ham.
That's right. No, it's so true. And I had a really interesting conversation with a friend of mine one day, like a month ago. And we were talking about politics, something that I tend to avoid. And it was really interesting because we actually had a conversation, and I really listened to his point of view. and what he thought. And some of the things made sense to me. I could or I could understand why he felt like that. And
Right.
other things did not. But we also had the conversation and we're still great friends. And so it's not like, but it was an open space of like an honest conversation for like a good whatever, however long we were on Zoom. Or I don't remember, it might have been on the phone, but either it didn't matter. But we actually were able to have that conversation with someone and with with each other. And so there's something about it was like, and it requires all the things we talk about. It requires patience to listen to somebody and actually be open enough to hear their point of view, even though you don't agree with it.
Hmm.
It's like listening without that need to respond. And so you're really listening to what they have to say.
Right.
Is and yeah, so it was a practice in all of those things.
Right. And that's really where, instead of just making noise and expending, air, something's getting built. When you have agreement with another human being and you can at least be understood and understand, there's something that's there. There's a connection and a relationship, building block that goes into place. It's all part of the whole trust game,
Mhm.
and trust game is going on whether you realize it or not. 24/7, you're either building trust or you're eroding it. And unfortunately, trust is not an always on or always off type of a situation, because the neat part of it is that you can completely exhaust the bank on trust, but you can rebuild it in an instant. Sometimes the amount of energy that it takes, or the type of an action that it takes to rebuild eroded trust, um, I think really the costlier it is for you in terms of looking bad publicly, or just plain looking bad individual to individual, because that's really where courage comes in, and that's where you lay yourself open and you invite, you know, uh, ridicule, and then if trust is then present, there's none that comes back. But you got to
Mhm.
be ready to that it will come back. Yeah, it will if it does. But all of that stuff, but you still got to get in the situation, play your cards, and wait to get called.
Mhm. Absolutely.
And that's where, risking is where human love comes from. I think human love that means something anyway. That's my story.
Mhm. Mhm. You're right. And yeah, I
So
was just thinking of that. That's another word. That's a pretty deep word, which is trust.
yeah, all that, it's all related. Honor, honesty, you know.
Trust, and which I don't know, but I just I think of the same, probably somewhat of the same root, and I don't know the etymology of trust, but is true, is truth, and I'm assuming that they're, which I might be wrong, um, probably related.
Yes. Yeah, I think if you're, I don't know, when I first broke into management, I think I was maybe 21, 22 years old. I had people that were in their 50s and 60s, that I had to supervise, whatever that meant at the time. I didn't know. I was making it up as I went along. But when it came right down to it, the only thing that I could ever default to was doing the right thing. And whether or not something worked had more to do with being verifiably true, as you're saying, and less to do with manipulating people into doing what you wanted them to do, like winning, the day in the moment. How you build that fortress of strength around you and get people to stand up for you when you're not in the room has nothing to do with winning the day in that moment. It has everything to do with people knowing this is how you and I operate together. I
Mm.
got your back, you got my back, and we never have to talk about it.
Right, right. Very, very, very nicely said.
So here we are. Another hour of absolute wonderful fun together, in my humble opinion.
In your humble opinion. Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's what it's all about, right? It's just being able to enjoy time. You know, time is something that we can't get back. And so, you know, spend your time wisely.
Well said. Well said. Sitting here looking at milestones.
Exactly.
Having evidence of how we've spent our time.
Exactly.
That goes back to something that a guy named Werner Erhard, who I consider to be one of the best human developers. You know, the tactics were at times, you know, a little bit Neanderthal, you know, for the time. But, you know, in a world of Archie Bunkers, you had to kind of hit people with a 2x4 to get their attention. But once you got their attention, then you could ask them important questions like, what's your life for? What are you building? What are you building and why is it important? You can start asking people the questions that allow them to build the foundation of, here's why I am working on being trustworthy before trusting other people. You want to be loved, then love other people. You know, we want to be respected, respect other people in the face of you don't deserve it, you know? Without knowing who they are or what they can do for you. There's no manipulation or no quid pro quo. Just be this way in the world because.
Because it's like my motto, just be kind. Be kind to everybody I meet. Be kind.
Yes, ma'am.
So thank you, Bill, for another fun hour.
You are very welcome, and it is always my privilege and pleasure. So would you like to make our big request of our listeners?
Sure. So today and this week, till you listen to us next week, is there something else I can help with? The time, and we'll use the word time, take a moment, take the time to message someone, call someone, send them a real card, like a snail mail card, to let them know that you appreciate them and that you're really happy that they're in your life.
I love it. Thank you, Jan. Thank you, listeners. We are lighting the candle. A World That Works. Episode 199 is in the can. Bye for now.
Bye-bye, everybody.
You've been listening to Lighting the Candle, A World That Works, part of the Xvadio podcast network. You can catch every episode of Lighting the Candle, as well as the rest of the network, at xvadio.com, the Apple Podcasts app, YouTube, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Audible, Amazon Music, and wherever you find podcasts.
Hey, it's Ryan Seacrest. Life comes at you fast, which is why it's important to find some time to relax. A little you time. Enter Chumba Casino. With no download required, you can jump on anytime, anywhere for the chance to redeem some serious prizes. So treat yourself with Chumba Casino and play over 100 online casino-style games, all for free. Go to ChumbaCasino.com to collect your free welcome bonus. Sponsored by Chumba Casino.